Welcome back to the Green Rush. I'm your host today. I'm Josh Kincaid, host of the Talking Hedge, your cannabis business podcast. With me for the next couple of segments, Josh Crossney, director of cannabis events with MJH Life Sciences, and Meg LaRue. She's a group editorial director of cannabis science and technology, also with Cannabis Patient Care and MJH Life Sciences. Also with us, we've got three other guests. Rylie Maedler. She's the president of Rylie Sunshine. Also, Janie Maedler. She's managing partner and chief operating officer of Rylie Sunshine. And Dr. Leah Sarah. She's the associate professor and program director, Master of Science in Medical Cannabis Science and Therapeutics with the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy. Ladies, thanks for being with us. And Josh, thank you all.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Josh, do you want to jump in and because these are some of your guests, maybe introduce them? Take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start with Janie and Rylie. These special ladies have been a part of my life for many, many years. And, we touched a little bit earlier about pediatrics and the advocacy there and how that has been a part of my journey since the beginning. And knowing this family that you see right in front of you has been a big part of that. And I remember when Rylie was yay high to the knee, and now she, has back then her mom was sharing her story, with her, but now she is a young adult and she's going out and sharing her own story. So I would love for you guys to just, maybe introduce yourself briefly and talk about how you got into the industry and what the years have been like.
Okay. I'm Rylie Maedler. How I got into the industry kind of. In second grade, I was diagnosed with aggressive giant cell granuloma bone tumors. And basically what they did is they ate away the majority of the bones in my face. And I was supposed to be deformed for the rest of my life, no teeth. And my mom, she was looking up certain options to help me with my pain because I had a lot of bone pain in my face. And cannabis kept popping up. So we decided to try it. And right away, we saw good results in my pain and swelling. And only a few months later, we saw bone regeneration and tumor shrinkage. And so once I left the hospital, I asked my mom, why we have to hide the fact that I take my medicine, which is cannabis. And she told me it was illegal. So I was like, why don't we change that? So I made medicinal cannabis for pediatrics legal in Delaware. I made my foundation, Rylie Smile Foundation. And we've passed multiple laws within the state of Delaware to help widen access of medicinal cannabis.
Can
That's
I step
awesome.
in and just ask a question about how that happened? Do you think that CBD was the gateway towards that regulation? And can we blame Charlotte for that awareness?
I definitely think it probably helped, but
yeah.
we were still facing a lot of stigma in Delaware.
In Delaware, we lived in a place where there wasn't much education around it. And people in our state, it was legal, and most of the legislators, they were all just very against it. I think it just had to do with our region. I think it took them relating to this little girl, begging for her life. For them to break down those walls and actually look into it, and they gave us a lot of questions. I talked to each legislator separately.
Yeah, but I definitely think that Charlotte helped
definitely,
to at least soften that wall that had to come down. She did definitely helped it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So Rylie, why was it so important to you after, going through this and helping to change laws? Why was it so important for you to use your voice, and travel the world and speak to others and, not just in the cannabis industry, but also in different governments and different settings? Why was it important for you to not only get the help you needed, but to also use your voice to try to help others?
Ever since I was little, once I left the hospital, I had almost survivor's guilt where I felt like it was unfair that I was better and I knew about cannabis and I took it. And that other patients in the hospital, their families didn't know about it. So that's why I made my foundation to help educate families all around the world. And through you, I started being able to speak by myself. And I just started speaking in as many places as I could because I realized that it's so important for doctors everywhere to know how important cannabis is as a medicine. And I just made it my goal to help as many kids and people in general as I can.
You're such an amazing speaker, Rylie. I heard you talk in May at CSC West, and I was in tears over everything you were saying.
Oh, thank you.
Your talks are really incredible. Could you share a little bit about what you're planning to present at CSC East in a couple weeks?
Yeah, so my presentation, my main goal is to like give the audience a good idea of like how much medicinal cannabis greatly impacts pediatrics and why we must advocate for all pediatrics to have legal access to medicinal cannabis.
That's great. And Janie, you're giving a talk as well, right? Can you share what you'll be
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah, I'm in the psychedelic section, and what we have found is even in states that, where cannabis is illegal or psilocybin is illegal, parents are still reaching out to us asking, like, how do I do this? How do I maneuver getting this for my child? Because we've tried everything on earth. And so we came to the conclusion that whether or not it's legal, parents are going to use it, but they're not going to reach out for help. So the main point of my talk is just to identify like what psychedelics are kind of popular and out there, what they look like, and some harm reduction. And a little of that will be kind of like a show and tell thing of like, this is what they look like. This is how people usually prepare them. Mm-hmm. Because families fall victim very quickly to other people who are supposedly growers, cultivators, and don't have the best intentions. So we just want to arm patients and families with like how to identify how it's supposed to be prepared and some of the harm reduction techniques.
So Janie, do you see that like different from cannabis, how like most people in their life had some type of experience or at least exposure to it? I would imagine with psychedelics, a lot of people, it's probably their first time even thinking about it, let alone seeing it or being in the same room with it. So are you seeing a big difference there from kind of the knowledge going into it, even if that knowledge is basic, like a lot of people have cannabis, compared to the psychedelic industry?
Yeah, it seems like with cannabis, people want to know, like, how is this working? Is this dangerous? Is it going to interact with my other medicines or my child's chemotherapy? And we have to like really dig deep and get down to the nitty gritty of like educating parents. And it seems like with psilocybin, they're just like, how can I get access? They have no more questions. Like, how can I get access? How much should I use? And there's no questions about like, how does this work or will this interact? And it's quite different. And I don't know why that is, but like we have a family that we're working with right now, and we're trying different types of phenotypes for their daughter who suffers from like really severe OCD and autism. And their older son told them that they should use, psilocybin for their daughter. And like, it's a really good idea. And when the mom told me that, she was scared to ask me at first. And then I was just surprised because I couldn't imagine telling my parents, hey, give little brother some psilocybin, he'll be fine. It just wouldn't have crossed my mind to communicate that to my parents.
Yeah, definitely. So Dr. Sarah, I want to get you involved too here. You're speaking, I think, in the psychedelic track as well. Do you want to share a little bit about your background and what you're doing there in the psychedelics realm?
Sure, and I just want to say hi to Rylie and Janie as well. They spoke last spring at our symposium. Hopefully they'll be willing to come back and speak to another class next spring. And it's wonderful. You're inspirational wherever you go. So I'm excited to be sharing this screen space with you today, and to be speaking alongside you guys at CSC West. So I'm also speaking in the psychedelic track along with two of my colleagues, Dr. Chad Johnson and Dr. Andy Koop. We all teach in the Master of Science in Medical Cannabis Science and Therapeutics program. But what we're talking about at the CSC is psychedelics. Like many people, we've really been interested and reading increasingly about this resurgence in interest in psychedelics as medicine. And because our perspective on cannabis as medicine has always been that it is medicine, and that is how we want to approach it and how we teach it, that it's no more or less special than other medicines, and that what makes it different is history and politics, right? That's the difference, but it's still medicine. And so we're We have seen that there are lots of wonderful talks in the psychedelic track. And so as the keynote, we really hope to give an overview of a little bit of the history. Dr. Coop and Dr. Johnson are going to talk about the pharmacology and some of the medicinal chemistry of some of these psychedelic compounds. I'll talk a little bit about some of the research that's been going on. And we really hope to kind of open up the psychedelic track to get people excited about all of the other talks that'll be happening in that track later in the conference.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dr. Sarah, I'd love to get your thoughts on, the difference between the burgeoning psychedelics industry compared to the cannabis industry, because what I feel like we're seeing in psychedelics is a lot more clinical research based approach compared to cannabis, which has largely been an advocacy based approach going back to the 90s in California with Prop 215. So it seems like we kind of saw a little bit of this conversation with psychedelics when we went in to hibernation for COVID, but then it feels like we came out and it's just so much has developed and popped up all over the place, from ketamine to psilocybin to DMT, and just research is being done, across the board. So what do you see just from, your standpoint in the academic space of the differences in those, kind of starts and, maybe where you see the psychedelic industry coming, and if you think that'll happen faster for us now than it did and still happening for cannabis?
Well, I think in some ways it will, because we're looking at multiple, agents and multiple compounds, some of which are already, FDA approved for some, treatment purposes like ketamine. So while, there's still things like psilocybin and LSD and MDMA may have a little bit further to go in terms of their acceptance in the medical community, we are seeing, I agree, a more research-focused approach as opposed to seeing advocacy and industry preceding the research, which is what we've really seen with cannabis, which is what makes it such an interesting and challenging space to navigate from, a medical and regulatory perspective. So I agree, it is different. But I'm really encouraged by the interest in research and the fact that big research institutions like Hopkins and are starting to do this research, and NIH is starting to fund this research. I think we'll see a big explosion in what we know about these different agents and how they can treat different conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I've just recently started digging more and more into some of the details about some of the research going on and talking with some of the researchers, and, some of the psilocybin research that's going on out there. At least I was surprised to find out kind of the dosing protocols that are being used. And, one of the researchers I was talking to said, comparatively, 5 to 5.5 grams of dried psilocybin from mushrooms. And obviously, when I say comparatively, we're working with synthetic psilocybin right now in most of the research capacities. But for me, without saying too much, for those of us who have been on journeys, and you can think of, putting 5.5 grams down the hatch, it just kind of makes you go, whoa, you know what I mean? So I thought that was really interesting, because I'm thinking, I'm sure they're microdosing, and it's like, people sign up, they go in, it's like, is it really worth it to go to, the institution every day to do this? But then when you find out they're actually going there and having, a real journey, it's interesting.
Right. It is interesting. And I think it's important to, to also say that this is not, these are all really controlled environments when we talk about, dosing and large doses and these experiences. It's not just the compound itself. It goes along with a very strictly controlled, psychotherapy and a controlled environment, and someone who is assisting the person to make sure that they are safe, they feel safe, and that it's not just someone doing this on their own. And so I think that's important to point that out when we think about how do we apply what we learn in research to what people might actually, do at home, especially, in self-treating. And obviously, with cannabis, we know that there's lots of self-treatment. So self-treating with psychedelics may or may not, be equivalent, and I think it's important to state that.
Mm-hmm. What about brain health? Rylie said just a few minutes ago about the cancers in her brain. Um, Wondering about, so we already know that MDMA and all of these other available drugs can help with depression and other ailments in the brain. There's a patent 6630507, I think, for the neural protectant that the government has with cannabis specifically. How does cannabis affect brain health, and is there a difference in applications like smoking it versus consuming an edible, for example?
So, you know, there are a lot of different compounds in cannabis. And I will say that what the research says about the long-term effects of cannabis can be, again, it can be hard to apply what a lot of the research says about cannabis, which typically looks at cannabis being used recreationally or cannabis being abused, and apply that to a medical model. We don't have a lot of observational data on the long-term effects on the brain of people who are using cannabis medically, as opposed to people who are using it recreationally, or people who are being treated for substance abuse. So it can be hard to say, to parse that out in terms of medical cannabis versus adult use.
Rylie and Janie, do you guys want to jump in there as well?
Yeah. So I had bone tumors, but so I've had like 9 years of MRIs, and my brain has developed greatly, especially because I also have epilepsy. I'm not sure if I mentioned that earlier, but 10 days after one of my procedures, I started having seizures. And my brain looks great for having epilepsy also, because cannabis helps me control my seizures. And I'm a straight A student. So I think, if anything, it's definitely helped me. I wouldn't be in school if it hadn't been for cannabis.
Well, you're a straight A student, you have a job, you are in all the plays at school, and you're always active in all the activities. So for me, you're a living example of the opposite of the stereotype of what people think is this plant, that you're just, sitting there, staying on the couch, eating potato chips. Because anytime I see you, you're active, you're going to the beach, you're hanging with your friends, you're working. Or in Greece, we were talking about Olivia a little earlier, and I know she loved that you were in Greece at school. So I think it's great that you're breaking those stereotypes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I really think, like, when we originally passed the first law that they named after her, that was the convincing moment, is when the senators like looked at all of her medical reports, and then she, being like 8, I think you were 8 years old when we first talked to them. Yeah. And then she starts pulling out all of her report cards, and she they're looking at all of her report cards, and you can see a huge difference of, like, there was one year that it was before we had started the cannabis, and she was in pain, and her grades
weren't good,
because she's in pain, and you cannot
I couldn't focus in school.
So, and we showed them that, like, this is before cannabis, this is afterwards. And look at these grades. They went from like B's to like A+, honor roll, like everything you could think of. And she was receiving all these awards for, doing these state testing.
That's fantastic. And then again, like I said, you're just, breaking those stereotypes. And, I know personally from knowing you guys that a lot of the minds, you've changed, it's been reaching across the aisle. It's been, the left, the right, and everyone in between. Right. And, you've made believers out of people that were not believers. And I've seen it happen right in front of my eyes. So I think it's amazing the power that you both have with sharing your story.
Are you guys just using THC, or are there other cannabinoids? There was some talk about using CBD in the treatment of behavioral problems with children, like autism, ADHD, that we mentioned. I use CBD to help me with my smoking cravings. My guilty pleasure is a blunt. I'm not saying it's the right thing. I'm just saying that's my guilty pleasure. And I don't want to smoke a blunt during the day. So to kind of push that off, I use CBD, and it kind of helps me with my smoking cravings. Is there any other unknowns out there where it kind of helped, where you kind of scratch your head and go, I didn't even think about that?
Well, we had I hope this is answering your question. We had an instance. So when she first started on the cannabis, she was taking high THC, high CBD. And then, as when she developed epilepsy, we switched out most, not all, but most of the THC with THCA. And I used to, fill her little capsules up, before school. And her brother has autism, and he had therapists and everything. And one day he picked up her THCA pills and ate them, because that was just something he would do. You couldn't leave things laying around like that. And that day, his one-on-one therapist called us and asked us if he was on any new medication, because he would respond to the teacher appropriately. He raised his hand to answer, which he hadn't done in like 5 years. And that was like let's try that again, And so that, he started on his journey being a medical cannabis patient as well. And so those are some of those moments that you accidentally stumble upon something. And I don't think that the THCA and CBGA, I don't think they're given enough credit, because people, they want pain, more pain relief, but like some of the most amazing things I've seen is somebody being doubled over with GI distress, giving them some THCA or some CBDA, and half an hour later it's like as if it never happened. So there's a lot of like aha moments that we have throughout the last 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, and there's still so much research that's going on.
So I know that you guys have the farm where you guys are now hemp farmers. Add that to the resume. Yeah. I would love to get your thoughts on, obviously we saw the farm bill pass, and I always say that was like a double-edged sword, because it kind of opened up access, but it also kind of created a lot of situations where we see CBD in gas stations and, all crazy places like that. So could you share a little bit about like, cultivating, producing and distributing CBD and hemp with good intention, and some of the challenges and things that people need to think about and look out for when you do go into the grocery store or the gas station and you see something there, and what are some of the things people should be looking out for, since we are seeing this widespread distribution of CBD because of the farm bill?
Sure. So I've noticed like a lot of like medicines that are sold in like random gas stations or stores, like you mentioned, a lot of times they have like fake labels on them showing like what's supposed to be in the medicine. And then you like, there was this one time where there was a QR code on the label that my mom saw, and she like scanned the QR code. Most people just look at it and be like, oh, it's fine. She scanned the QR code and it was a totally different lab report than what was originally on the bottle. So a lot of people try to like show a different like sort of medicine that's not actually what it is, just to make money and make people feel like it's safe. Like a lot of companies, like they process their oil terribly and there ends up being alcohol in the medicine or mold. And I've experienced that as a patient, as along with a lot of other people, I'm sure. And so that's a huge problem, just companies deceiving people, just trying to get money.
Yeah. And then with the farming, like a lot of like, we learned this too, like before it's a lot of work. Before we got into farming, we knew that like you have to have transparency and you have to have lab reports and really dissect whatever it is you're putting in your body. Some of the things that we learned was, you should always test your soil and your irrigation water before you even put the first seed into the ground.
Hemp soaks up whatever is in the soil.
Yeah. So, and when it was interesting because when we sent all of our soil samples and irrigation samples, we sent it to Waypoint Analytical, and when all the results came back, I called the lab tech because I didn't understand the report, and I wanted to make sure that it was safe and it was okay and we could proceed with our plans. Or sell the land, just defend it. And he was able to explain everything to me. And he said, you're the first person who's ever called me this, concerned and wanting to understand it. He said, most people will not even do this lab. They'll wonder where the metal came from in their flour, and they'll still sell it. They just won't tell people that metal showed up. They'll sell it for a little less. And that was like, still, even though I already knew people did this, it still shocked me that there were actually like farmers out there that wouldn't test their soil. And then when something pops up in their flour, they're like, oh, I don't know where that came from. Must be a mistake. I'm gonna sell it anyway. And so we've run across that a lot also with farming. Like just the whole process is so important to make sure that every step of the way. You're
Watching
checking
out,
things,
yeah.
watching for mold, checking your plants. I mean, there's like so much into it, so many different layers before it even gets to the bottle. And another thing that we learned was by visiting dispensaries. A lot of dispensaries, all of their medicines have no terpenes. They add the terpenes later, and I've always like wondered why. You know, you could just extract the terpenes. In processing ourselves, we learned why. It takes longer and it's more expensive. So the process is, you know, you grind your flour, you put your bags in, and you extract the terpenes, and then you take it back out, and then you have to decarb and put it back in. So it's really almost like a triple step compared to just running it for isolates and selling. So there, you know, we just learned a lot of the steps and the care that it takes. And then once you learn all that, you start looking around at all the other farmers and kind of scrutinizing them a little bit, you know?
Well, especially when you're spending more money to do it the right way and to produce, you know, quality, it can be frustrating, I'm sure, seeing.
Yeah. So we do go with, like, even when we get, you know, we sell online, but even when we get emails, like, I mean, sometimes we probably give them too much information because they'll ask me like one little 4-word question and I send them 4 paragraphs back, you know?
Yeah.
But like, it's just so important to educate the consumer as like, this is the process. And you even want to see that that lab, because we've heard of a lab that's 20 miles from us that has like, when they went to get trained, certified in CO2 extraction, the instructor left because there's rat droppings all over the place. And this is a place that I've seen on the news, and I was just like, oh wow, you know, competition, but now I know that they're not.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you talked a lot about the science and the testing, so I'd like to segue back to Dr. Sarah. And, you know, you are one of the co-chairs of the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy's Masters in Science, Cannabis Science and Therapeutics program. So could you share with the viewers just a little bit about that program? And I believe you guys are enrolling currently, so maybe also share how people could learn more or even sign up if they were interested.
Sure, absolutely. This is a 2-year part-time Master of Science program. It is primarily online, although we do have students come to our campus in Rockville, Maryland, once per semester, so 4 times total over a period of 2 years. And this is a comprehensive program really focused on the science, so the pharmacology, the pharmaceutical science, the medicinal chemistry related to cannabinoids and cannabis medicine, what we know in terms of medical evidence, how to interpret medical evidence, how to apply that to patients in different medical conditions, the policies, you know, health policy and advocacy related to, you know, all related to medical cannabis. So students have opportunity to take a lot of different electives to really make this, you know, an individually focused degree. And we've got a really diverse group of students, you know, in terms of their academic and professional backgrounds. We do have clinicians who are in our program, so nurses, pharmacists. We have basic scientists, so you know, microbiologists and chemists, and we have a lot of people with no science or medical background, so patient advocates, a lot of entrepreneurs and business professionals, public health professionals, and we really want to encourage that diverse group. We think it makes a really rich experience for us as faculty and hopefully for our students as well. We really promote a lot of professional development and networking and you know, career development while they're in the program. We are accepting applications for fall of 2023. We've just started our fall 2022 semester with 180 new students. And so our application cycle is open for fall of 2023. The only requirement for enrollment in the program is a bachelor's degree. It doesn't need to be in a specific topic. In terms of the science, we teach it all from the ground up. And letters of recommendation and a personal statement are things that we really highly value when we're when we're looking at applications. So yeah, the website is pharmacy.umaryland.edu. You can get to our program from there, and I highly encourage, if you're interested, to check it out.
And how about you guys, Rylie, Janie? Where can they find you guys at?
So I have a foundation website, which is the RylieSmileFoundation.org. And my oil company also has a website, RylieSunshine.com. And I also have an Instagram, hi.achievingkid, but hi is spelled H-I. And yeah, that's where you could reach me. I also have a Facebook account.
We can find you all over the place. All right, we're going to run to a commercial break. Josh and Meg, they're going to stick around, come back with us for another panel. So I want to thank my guest, Dr. Leah Sarah. She, again, Associate Professor, Program Director, Master of Science in Medical Cannabis Science and Therapeutics at the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy, as well as Rylie and Janie Maedler with Rylie Sunshine. Appreciate all of y'all for coming with us. Thanks again. And we're going to take a quick commercial break. We're going to come right back.